The black folder sat unopened on my lap, the golden embossed lettering catching the light from the chandelier above. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I could feel my father's eyes narrow from across the table as I started to speak. Actually, I have some thoughts about the new direction for... Sarah, not now, my father cut in, voice firm but quiet. We're having a family dinner. No business. Talk. He turned to my brother with a smile. Mark, tell us more about that property deal you're closing this month. The hushed silence that followed felt weighted. 20 years of being interrupted, overlooked, and dismissed, condensed into one perfect moment of clarity. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't slam my hand on the table. I simply looked at my father, really looked at him, and tucked the folder back into my bag. Little did anyone know that inside that folder was the official announcement of my Innovation Award for developing the software platform that pulled my father's company back from the edge of bankruptcy. The same company where my brother held a VP title he barely earned, where my father still acted as if my contributions were cute efforts from his little girl who didn't quite understand the real business. I was about to walk out when the dinner was interrupted by my father's phone ringing. His assistant was calling, unusual for our sacred family dinners where phones were supposedly banned, except, of course, for his. I watched his expression shift from annoyance to confusion to shock as he listened. The Crawford and Myers Award? Tonight? Sarah's name was announced? There must be some mistake. But there was no mistake, and that moment changed everything. My name is Sarah Pearson, and for the past 8 years, I've been the invisible pillar holding up Pearson Technologies, my father's company, though he'd never describe it that way. I'm the quietest person in our family of 4, which isn't saying much since the Pearsons have always been known for their presence. Dad commands rooms without trying. Mom charms everyone with her practiced warmth. My brother Mark has perfected the art of speaking with absolute confidence, regardless of whether he knows what he's talking about. Then there's me, the one who stays late debugging code while everyone else networks at industry events. The one who spends weekends rebuilding the customer management system while my brother posts LinkedIn updates about sacrificing for success from his boat. The one who quietly absorbed the Sarah, just listen for once comments during meetings, only to have my suggestions repackaged in my brother's voice and praised as brilliant innovations weeks later. I never wanted the spotlight. I just wanted acknowledgement. Just a nod, a good job, a moment of being seen clearly by my family, especially my father. But over time, those small hopes hardened into something different, something quiet, but unyielding within me. That dinner was supposed to be a celebration of Pearson Technologies' sudden turnaround. What no one at the table knew, what my father had somehow failed to realize despite the documentation crossing his desk, was that the miracle software solution saving the company had been developed entirely by me. Not the development team my father praised in company-wide emails. Not the consultants he'd hired for 6 figures. Me, working nights and weekends, creating an integrative platform that streamlined everything from inventory to customer service. When my father's phone rang that night, it was because the Crawford and Myers Innovation Award ceremony was happening across town, and they'd just announced me as this year's recipient for technological innovation in business solutions. They were confused when neither I nor anyone from Pearson Technologies was there to accept it. I remember the look on my father's face when he hung up the phone, confusion first, then disbelief. Sarah, he said slowly, did you develop the Phoenix platform? The table went silent. My mother's fork paused midway to her mouth. Mark stopped, mid-sentence about his latest deal. Yes, I replied simply. I created Phoenix from the ground up. But why didn't you tell me? I met his eyes steadily. I did. 3 times. You told me to leave the technical solutions to the development team, You told me to focus on my actual job in customer support. You told me, and I quote, "We need serious solutions, not pet projects." The silence that followed held a different quality now. Not the usual silence that followed when I was interrupted, but something heavier, something that felt like the first honest moment we'd had as a family in years. "We need to go to the ceremony," my mother finally said, already reaching for her purse. "It's too late," I replied, gathering my things. "They've already announced the winners." I stood up, smooth and calm. "Excuse me." I walked out of that restaurant without looking back, the weight of 20 years of dismissals suddenly lifting from my shoulders. I wasn't angry. I wasn't hurt. I was just finally, completely clear. Growing up as Robert Pearson's daughter meant living in a household where achievement wasn't celebrated. It was expected. Dad built Pearson Technologies from nothing, a fact we were reminded of at every family dinner, holiday gathering, and random Tuesday. His story of sleeping in his car during the early days while coding the first version of the company's signature product had become family mythology. My brother absorbed these stories like nutrients, fashioning himself into a younger version of our father, bold, assertive, the natural heir apparent. I absorbed different lessons: watch, learn, solve problems, don't make waves. When I joined the company after college, instead of taking a prestigious offer from a tech giant in San Francisco, my father seemed surprised but pleased in his distracted way. "Customer success is a good place to start," he said, as if I hadn't graduated top of my class in computer science, as if the algorithms I'd developed during my internship hadn't already been implemented in products used by millions. Within 6 months, I'd streamlined the entire customer service workflow. Within a year, I'd reduced call times by 40% while improving satisfaction scores. My father nodded at the quarterly presentations where these achievements were highlighted, never quite connecting them to me. Meanwhile, Mark moved from department to department, always at a director level or higher, leaving confusion in his wake that others, often me, would quietly resolve. Dad saw Mark's constant movement as versatility. He never saw the weekend hours I put in fixing the messes. When the company started struggling 3 years ago, I watched expenses skyrocket while revenues plateaued. I noticed the integration, problems between our legacy systems and the expensive new solutions the consultants recommended. I could see the whole picture because I'd worked in nearly every department. Not officially, but as the invisible problem solver who was called when things broke down. I started building Phoenix after hours, naming it for what I hoped it would help the company do: rise from the ashes. I tried to show early versions to my father. Once, he glanced at it for 3 seconds before taking a call. Another time, he told me to run it by Mark, who never returned my emails about it. The third time, he gave me the serious solutions speech that still echoed in my mind, so I stopped trying to get his attention and just built the damn thing. When it was ready, I implemented it quietly through allies I'd made in IT, presenting it as a trial update to our systems. The results were immediate and dramatic. Suddenly, departments could communicate seamlessly. Customer data flowed properly between sales and service. Inventory synced with orders in real time. The efficiencies created were saving the company millions. The official story became that the development team had created a breakthrough. My father praised the team extensively, gave bonuses to the department heads, took the executive board out for a lavish dinner. I received a standard annual review that noted I was meeting expectations in my role. I didn't build Phoenix for recognition. I built it because I could see how to fix what was broken, and fixing things was what I'd always done. But somewhere, deep inside me, a small voice whispered, "This time they'll see you. This time will be different." It wasn't. Until that phone call. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. After I walked out of the restaurant that night, I didn't go home. I drove to Crescent Beach instead, parked near the shoreline and sat on the hood of my car watching the waves. My phone buzzed constantly. First my mother, then Mark. Finally, my father. I silenced it without looking at the messages. For the first time in my life, I felt completely calm in my decision to stop participating in a dynamic that diminished me. I wasn't heartbroken or angry. I just couldn't go back to being invisible. The next morning, I called in sick to work, something I'd never done before. Then I shut off my phone and spent the day reorganizing my apartment, clearing out old clothes, and finally setting up the small home office I'd been meaning to create for years. It felt symbolic somehow, carving out space that was purely mine. When I finally turned my phone back on that evening, there were 27 missed calls and 43 text messages. Most expressed disbelief, several demanded explanations, a few attempted apologies. My father had sent a single text, "My office, 9 a.m. tomorrow." I didn't reply to anyone. Instead, I opened my laptop and updated my long-neglected LinkedIn profile, adding details about Phoenix and the Crawford and Myers Award. Then I sent polite emails to 3 companies that had tried to recruit me over the years, inquiring if they were still interested in my skills. By morning, I had 2 interview offers and a request for a coffee meeting. I dressed carefully in a blue suit I'd bought but rarely worn, drove to Pearson Technologies, and walked calmly to my father's corner office. His assistant Jennifer gave me a nervous smile as I passed. "He's waiting for you," she said, her voice unusually gentle. My father was standing at the window when I entered, looking out at the city skyline. He turned when the door closed, and I was surprised to see he looked tired, older somehow. "The board called an emergency meeting last night," he said without preamble. "About Phoenix. About you." I nodded but said nothing. "They want to know why the person who single-handedly saved the company wasn't even in a management position. Why I didn't know my own daughter created our most valuable product." He ran a hand through his silver hair. "I didn't have good answers." "I'm sure you came up with something," I replied, my voice neutral. He winced slightly. "Sarah, I don't understand. Why didn't you fight harder to be heard? Why didn't you make me listen?" The question was so perfectly representative of everything wrong between us that I actually laughed. A short, surprised sound. "That's not how listening works, Dad. It's not my job to force you to value what I say. It's not my responsibility to shout over you and Mark until you acknowledge me. But I tried 3 times to show you Phoenix. 3 times. After that, I made a choice to stop seeking validation I was never going to get and just do the work anyway. That's not a failure on my part. That's me adapting to exactly what this family taught me my words were worth." The silence stretched between us, heavy with decades of missed connections. "The board wants to promote you," he finally said. "Chief Innovation Officer, reporting directly to me." I shook my head. "No." "No?" He looked genuinely shocked. "Sarah, this is a C-suite position. The compensation package? I'm not interested." I placed a small flash drive on his desk. "This contains all the documentation for Phoenix, including future development paths and potential expansions of the platform. My resignation letter is also on there. My 2 weeks' notice starts today." He stared at the flash drive like it might explode. "You're leaving? Over one misunderstanding?" This wasn't one misunderstanding, Dad. This was my entire experience at Pearson Technologies. This was 8 years of having ideas dismissed, credit redirected, and my expertise questioned. Phoenix wasn't an anomaly. It was just the first time anyone outside this building noticed what I'm capable of. "Where will you go?" he asked, and I heard genuine concern beneath the question. "I have options," I said simply. I always had. Options. I stayed because this is family, and I thought that meant something. Now I'm choosing to find out what I can build when I'm actually seen and heard from the beginning. I turned to leave, but his voice stopped me. The award. The actual physical award they tried to give you last night. They're sending it here. He gestured to his desk. Where should we have it sent instead? I considered this for a moment. Keep it, I said finally. Put it in the lobby with the company's other achievements. It can be a reminder. Of what? Of what happens when you don't listen to the quietest person in the room. I walked out feeling lighter than I had in years, leaving my father standing in his office looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. It wasn't about hurting him or punishing the company. It was simply about finally honoring myself enough to walk, away from spaces where I had to fight to be valued. Word spread quickly through the company. By lunchtime, my modest cubicle in the customer success department had become a strange pilgrimage site, with employees from every level stopping by. Some awkwardly congratulated me on the award. Others expressed shock about my resignation. A few confided they'd always known I was underutilized. I accepted all comments with the same calm smile and continued organizing my files for handoff. Mark appeared around 2 o'clock, hovering uncertainly at the entrance to my cubicle. Unlike my father, who had seemed diminished by our confrontation, Mark looked agitated, almost feverish. You can't do this, he said without preamble. Do you have any idea what this looks like? What people are saying? Hello to you too, Mark, I replied, continuing to sort through my desk drawer. Dad's offering you a C-suite position. Most people work their entire careers without getting an opportunity like that. You're throwing it away over what? Hurt feelings? Because he didn't pat you on the head enough? I looked up at my brother, really studied him for perhaps the first time. His perfectly styled hair, expensive watch, the way he stood with his shoulders back in the stance he'd practiced to project authority. But his eyes held something I recognized. Fear. This isn't about hurt feelings, I said quietly. This is about recognizing that I will never reach my potential in an environment where I'm fundamentally not respected or heard. That's ridiculous. You just never learned how to speak up. In business, I shouldn't have to perform confidence. The way you do to have my expertise taken seriously? I interrupted, surprising both of us. And let's be honest, Mark. You're not worried about my career. You're worried about yours. Because if I created Phoenix without any support or recognition, people might start wondering what exactly you've contributed during your meteoric rise. He flinched as if I'd slapped him. You have no idea what I do for this company. You're right, I agreed. I don't. Because unlike you, I never took credit for other people's work. I never had to. He left without another word. His face flushed. I felt no satisfaction in the confrontation, just a strange sense of clarity. Mark and I had always operated in different realities within the same company. The difference was that I could see both, his world of perception management and networking, and my world of concrete solutions and behind-the-scenes fixes. He had only ever seen his own. My mother called that evening as I was making dinner, her voice tight with restraint. Sarah, honey, I think you're overreacting. Your father feels terrible. He wants to make things right. I'm sure he does, I replied, chopping vegetables with precise movements. But this isn't something he can fix with a title or a raise. Then what does fix it? Because walking away from your family's company seems extreme, sweetheart. It's not walking away from family, Mom. It's walking away from a toxic work environment. There's a difference. But we are Pearson Technologies, she insisted. It's who we are. Her words crystallized something I'd been feeling for years but hadn't articulated. That's the problem, I said gently. Dad is Pearson Technologies. Mark is Pearson Technologies. You're Pearson Technologies by extension. I'm just Sarah, who happens to work at Pearson Technologies, or did. That's not true, she protested, but weakly. When was the last time we had a family dinner where Dad didn't talk about the company? When was the last holiday that wasn't interrupted by urgent calls? When was the last conversation where my value as a person wasn't somehow tied to my contribution to Pearson Technologies. The silence on the line told me she couldn't remember either. I love you, Mom. I'm not disappearing from your lives. I'm just choosing not to work for a company where I'm fundamentally invisible. That seems reasonable, doesn't it? I heard her sigh. When did you get so strong, Sarah? I've always been strong, I replied. You just never had to notice before. The 2 weeks of my notice period were surreal. Suddenly, everyone wanted my input on everything. Meetings were rescheduled to accommodate my availability. Executives, who'd barely nodded to me in hallways, now stopped to chat. My father sent daily emails asking me to reconsider, each offering more generous terms than the last. I maintained the same polite, professional demeanor I always had. I documented everything about Phoenix, trained the team that would maintain it, and prepared thorough transition materials for my customer success role. I didn't work late. I didn't check emails after hours. I took lunch breaks away from my desk, sometimes walking to the small park nearby to sit in the sunshine, something I'd never allowed myself before. On my final day, I expected to quietly clean out my desk and slip away. Instead, I found myself summoned to the main conference room, where the entire executive team, my father, and even my brother waited. On the polished table sat a familiar black folder. Before you go, my father said, uncharacteristically hesitant, we wanted to acknowledge your contribution properly. He opened the folder and removed the official certificate from the Crawford and Myers Innovation Award ceremony. Next to it, he placed a bound document. This is the patent application for Phoenix, filed with you as the sole inventor. The legal team expedited it. I looked at the certificate, the patent paperwork, then at the faces around the table. Some seemed genuinely regretful. Others clearly just wanted to be on the right side of the narrative now that my achievement was public knowledge. My father's expression was harder to read, a complex mixture of pride, regret, and something that might have been fear. Thank you, I said simply, accepting the items. Sarah, my father said, his voice uncharacteristically uncertain. I know we can't undo the past, but the offer stands. Whatever title you want, whatever team you want to build, complete creative control. I tucked the certificate and patent into my bag. My decision stands too, but I appreciate the gesture. As I turned to leave, Mark stepped forward. I sent your LinkedIn profile to some people at Westbrook Systems, he said abruptly. They're looking for a chief technology officer, someone who can build something like Phoenix for them. I stared at him, genuinely surprised. Why would you do that? He shrugged, not quite meeting my eyes. Just because we can't work together doesn't mean you shouldn't get what you deserve somewhere else. It was perhaps the most honest thing he'd ever said to me. I nodded. Thank you, Mark. The company hosted a small goodbye gathering in the break room. I accepted the cake, the card, the awkward well wishes with grace. When it was over, I walked out of Pearson Technologies for the last time, not looking back at the building that had been the center of my family's universe for as long as I could remember. 3 months later, I accepted the CTO position at Westbrook Systems, not because of Mark's referral, but after a rigorous interview process where I was evaluated solely on my skills and vision. 6 months after that, Phoenix won 3 more industry awards. A year later, the platform I built for Westbrook was revolutionizing their industry too. I still see my family. Sunday dinners remain tense sometimes, but increasingly less so as we all adjust to our new reality. My father watches me now, really watches, when I speak, as if trying to make up for years of not seeing. Mark and I have developed a cautious relationship built on a new foundation of mutual respect. My mother has started a small business of her own, something she'd always wanted to do but never quite found the time for when she was supporting my father's company dreams. As for me, I find myself speaking more often, more clearly, with the Quiet confidence that comes from being in environments where my voice is valued from the start. I no longer measure my worth by whether the loudest person in the room acknowledges me. I no longer feel the need to disappear. Sometimes, in meetings where my team presents ideas and innovations without fear, where debate is encouraged, but everyone is heard, I think about that dinner, about the folder sitting in my lap, about my father's dismissal, about the phone call that changed everything. That moment wasn't just about an award or recognition. It was about finally seeing clearly that I had spent years trying to earn what should have been freely given: respect, acknowledgement, the simple courtesy of being heard. The greatest gift of walking away wasn't the better job, or the higher title, or even the recognition. It was the realization that my voice had always been valuable. I just needed to place it where others recognize that value too. Now, when I speak, people listen. Not because I shout. Not because I've learned to command attention like my father or project false confidence like my brother. They listen because I have something worth saying. I always did. Growing up as Robert Pearson's daughter meant understanding your place in the family hierarchy from an early age. My father built Pearson Technologies with nothing but determination and a brilliant mind for systems integration. Our dinner conversations revolved around circuit boards before I understood what they were. My childhood memories are punctuated by the glow of computer screens, the clicking of keyboards late into the night, and my father's animated voice explaining his latest breakthrough to whoever would listen. My mother, Helen, played her supporting role perfectly. A former marketing executive who stepped away to raise children and manage the household, she directed her organizational talents toward ensuring my father never had to worry about anything beyond his growing empire. She scheduled, she entertained clients, she raised us with precision and care, all while insisting it was her choice, her privilege to support greatness. My brother Mark was the natural heir apparent. 3 years older, louder by nature, and gifted with our father's commanding presence, he absorbed the family mythology like it was his birthright. He didn't just listen to the stories of how Dad slept in his car during the early days of the company, or how he coded for 3 days straight to meet his first major deadline. Mark internalized them, rehearsed them, practiced telling them with the same cadence and emphasis. By the time he was 10, he could command a room full of adults by sharing lessons from my father, as if they were his own hard-won wisdom. And then there was me. Quiet, observant, the one who fixed things. When Mark broke his robotics project, the night before it was due, I stayed up rebuilding it. When Dad's computer crashed before a presentation, I was the one who recovered the files. I wasn't seeking praise. I was solving problems because I could, because it was satisfying to make broken things work again. The pattern was established early. Mark would shine, I would support. Dad would lead, I would follow. Mom would manage, I would assist. Nobody planned it this way. Nobody sat me down and explained that my role was to be the reliable one, the one who filled in gaps without needing acknowledgement. It simply evolved, a natural ecosystem where each person played their part. The Pearson family moved through the world as a well-oiled machine, each cog turning precisely as expected. My teenage years revealed the first cracks in this perfect system. While Mark struggled with basic programming concepts, I was building my own apps by 14. When he barely passed calculus, I was teaching myself advanced algorithms. But in the narrative of our family, these facts were inconvenient anomalies. Mark's a big-picture person, Dad would explain to relatives. Sarah's good with details. The assumption was never malicious, just persistent. When I won the state mathematics competition in 10th grade, my achievement was met with mild surprise, as if I'd suddenly revealed a hidden talent for juggling. "I had no idea you were interested in math," my father said, genuinely perplexed, despite the fact that I'd been coding alongside him since I was 9. College applications arrived, and with them, a brief moment of recognition. My SAT scores opened doors to prestigious computer science programs. Stanford, MIT, Carnegie Mellon. They all wanted me. For a fleeting moment, my parents seemed to recalibrate their understanding of their children. "Sarah's the academic one," they'd tell friends with a hint of pride, as if this was a fact they'd always known. I chose MIT, throwing myself into an environment where merit mattered more than family dynamics. For 4 years, I thrived in the meritocracy of academia. My projects won awards. My professors mentioned future doctoral programs. Tech giants sent recruiters to my senior showcase. For the first time, I existed entirely as myself, not as Robert Pearson's quiet daughter. Then came graduation and the inevitable question: what next? The offers were numerous and impressive. Google wanted me for their AI division. Apple had a special projects team they thought I'd be perfect for. A promising startup offered equity and creative control. Each opportunity represented a path where I could continue being seen for my abilities rather than my place in a family structure. But there was also Pearson Technologies, my father's company, now a mid-sized regional success with 300 employees and growing pains. "We could use someone with your skills," he said during my graduation dinner, more casual suggestion than formal offer. "Start in customer success to learn the business from the ground up, then see where it takes you." It wasn't a compelling pitch. It wasn't even a good offer compared to my alternatives. But beneath his words lay an unspoken promise, a chance to finally be seen by my family, to earn my place in their eyes not just as the reliable daughter, but as a valuable contributor. Looking back, I can see how that desire, to be truly seen, by the people who should have seen me all along, clouded my judgment. I accepted a position at Pearson Technologies 3 weeks after graduation, turning down opportunities that my classmates called career-making. My professors were confused. My friends were baffled. "You're going to work for your dad? In customer service?" My roommate asked, genuinely concerned. "With your skills?" "It's just to learn the business," I explained, repeating my father's reasoning. "I'll move up quickly." My first day set the tone for what would follow. I arrived early, professional, in a blue blazer and pressed slacks, ready to prove myself beyond my family connection. My father was in meetings all day. My direct supervisor, unsure how to treat the boss's daughter, assigned me to shadow the newest team member, someone who'd started just 2 weeks prior. By lunch, I'd identified 3 major inefficiencies in their customer ticket system. By the end of the week, I'd coded a temporary fix that reduced response times by 20%. My supervisor was impressed, but hesitant to highlight my contribution too prominently. "Let's just say the team came up with some improvements," she suggested during the department meeting. I nodded, understanding the politics at play. I wasn't there to make waves. I was there to learn, to contribute, to eventually earn recognition, on merit alone. Mark had joined the company 2 years earlier, straight from completing an MBA. He'd started as Director of Business Development, a title created specifically for him. While I spent my days resolving customer complaints and documenting software bugs, he attended leadership retreats and client dinners. When we crossed paths in the hallway, he'd offer enthusiastic high fives and say things like, "Killing it in customer success, sis? Those tickets don't stand a chance." 6 months in, I had completely redesigned the customer service workflow, implemented automated solutions for common problems, and reduced the department's backlog by 60%. My annual review noted that I was meeting expectations and included a standard 3% raise. The same week, Mark was promoted to Vice President of Strategic Initiatives, a role with an ambiguous description, but a corner office and 2 assistants. I told myself it didn't matter. I was playing the long game. Results would speak for themselves. Merit would eventually triumph over nepotism and gender expectations. I just needed to keep producing excellent work, and recognition would follow. It was a comforting fiction that allowed me to swallow my growing frustration. The pattern continued for 2 years. I moved from customer success to product support, bringing the same efficiency and innovation to each role. My contributions were acknowledged in vague terms during department meetings. The team has made impressive strides, while specific credit went to managers who had done little more than approve my suggestions. Meanwhile, Mark cycled through executive titles: VP of Market Expansion, Director of Enterprise Solutions, Chief of Special Projects. Each new business card seemed to come with a larger office and greater visibility. The inequality might have been sustainable if Mark had been delivering results. But behind the scenes, I was increasingly cleaning up his messes. When his ambitious expansion plan created integration nightmares for our systems, I spent weekends rebuilding database architecture. When his enterprise solutions team promised features our software couldn't support, I built workarounds. When his special projects failed to materialize concrete outcomes, I provided technical solutions that could be quickly implemented to show progress. None of this was officially my job. None of it appeared in my performance reviews or compensation packages. It was just what I did. The reliable daughter, the problem solver, the one who made things work. I never complained to my father or confronted Mark directly. I simply fixed what needed fixing because the alternative was watching my family's company struggle, and that felt unthinkable. The company holiday party, 3 years into my tenure, marked another milestone in this unbalanced dynamic. Mark received the Innovator of the Year award for a client portal system that I had conceptualized, designed, and largely built after hours. As he accepted the glass trophy, thanking our father for his mentorship, I stood in the back of the Y room sipping champagne and maintaining a pleasant expression. A colleague from IT, one of the few who knew the truth about my contributions, sidled up beside me. "This is completely unfair," he muttered, watching Mark pose for photos with the executive team. "It's fine," I replied automatically. "The portal works. That's what matters." "You know, most people would have walked out by now," he said, studying me carefully. "There are dozens of companies that would kill to have you." I shrugged. "This is family." He raised an eyebrow. "Is it? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like exploitation with a side of gaslighting." His words stayed with me, an uncomfortable truth I wasn't ready to fully acknowledge. Was I making a noble sacrifice for family, or was I complicit in my own professional erasure? The question lingered, but my behavior didn't change. I continued the pattern, solving problems behind the scenes while others took credit publicly. Then came the crisis that would ultimately force everything into the open. Pearson Technologies had been growing steadily, but struggling with integration issues between our legacy systems and newer acquisitions. Customer complaints were increasing. Development timelines were slipping. Costs were rising while revenues plateaued. The executive team, including my father and brother, held emergency meetings behind closed doors. I wasn't invited to these meetings, but I understood the problems better than anyone. I had been working across departments for years, seeing how each system connected to others, identifying the inefficiencies that were now threatening the company's stability. During one particularly late night, fixing a critical failure in the order processing system, I realized what needed to be done. Not just a patch, but a complete reinvention of how our systems communicated. The next morning, I requested a meeting with my father. His assistant Jennifer gave me a sympathetic look. "He's booked solid with the crisis team," she explained. "But I can try to find 15 minutes next week?" "It's about the integration problems," I insisted. "I think I have a solution." Jennifer hesitated, then nodded. "Wait here." She disappeared into my father's office, returning moments later. "He says to write up your thoughts and send them to Mark's team. They're handling the technical response." The dismissal stung, but it wasn't surprising. I returned to my desk and began coding instead of writing up my thoughts. Words wouldn't convince them. working software might. Over the next 3 weeks, I created the first version of what would eventually become the Phoenix platform, an elegant integration layer that could connect our disparate systems without requiring expensive rewrites or migrations. When the prototype was functional enough to demonstrate, I tried again to share it with my father. This time, I caught him between meetings, laptop in hand. "Dad, I've built something that could solve our integration problems. Can I show you?" He glanced at his watch. "Sarah, we've got consultants working on this. Very expensive consultants. I appreciate your initiative, but we need serious solutions, not pet projects." He patted my shoulder. "Focus on your actual job, okay? The customer support team needs you." I stood in the hallway, laptop clutched against my chest, as he hurried to his next meeting. The interaction was so familiar, the dismissal couched in gentle patronizing, the assumption that I couldn't possibly have the answer when real experts were working on the problem. Yet this time, something shifted inside me. I didn't feel hurt or disappointed. I felt something closer to clarity. If they wouldn't look at my solution, I would implement it anyway. I had enough allies in IT and enough system access to deploy Phoenix as a test environment for improving customer support workflows. Nobody questioned it because nobody at the executive level paid attention to what happened in customer support. It was beneath their notice, just as I had been. The results were immediate and undeniable. Customer service response times dropped dramatically. Order processing errors decreased by 80%. Inventory synchronization issues that had plagued us for years simply disappeared. The system worked, elegantly, and efficiently solving problems that the expensive consultants were still diagramming on whiteboards. As Phoenix's impact spread throughout the company, the narrative began to form without my input. The development team must have created a breakthrough. The consultants' recommendations must be working. Mark's strategic direction must be paying off. The company was pulling back from the brink of crisis, and everyone had a theory about why, theories that never included me. During an all-hands meeting celebrating the turnaround, my father proudly announced that Pearson Technologies had overcome its challenges through teamwork, expertise, and innovation. He specifically thanked the development department, the executive leadership team, and the consultants. As applause filled the room, I sat quietly in the back row, equal parts proud of what my creation had accomplished and invisible in its success. That evening, I received an email notification that Pearson Technologies had been nominated for the Crawford & Myers Innovation Award for the Phoenix platform. The Crawford & Myers was the most prestigious recognition in our industry, celebrating technological breakthroughs that transformed business operations. Someone in the IT department had submitted the nomination, correctly listing me as the architect and developer. I stared at the email for a long time, wondering if this would finally change the pattern, if external validation would force my family to see what had been in front of them all along. Part of me hoped it would. Another part had stopped expecting recognition altogether. 2 weeks later, the official letter arrived confirming that Phoenix, and by extension me, had won the Crawford & Myers Award. The ceremony would be held the following month at the annual industry gala. I placed the letter in a simple black folder, considering how to share the news. After years of dismissal, I wanted this moment to be witnessed clearly, without minimization or redirection. I decided to bring the folder to our monthly family dinner. These dinners had started as casual gatherings but had evolved into de facto business meetings where my father and brother dominated the conversation with company talk, while my mother and I largely listened. It seemed fitting to break this pattern, where it was most entrenched. As we sat around the table at Castellino's, my father's favorite Italian restaurant, I waited for a natural opening in the conversation. Mark was describing his latest idea for market expansion, gesturing with his fork for emphasis while my father nodded approvingly. My mother asked appropriate questions at perfect intervals, maintaining the flow of their exchange. When Mark paused to take a bite of his pasta, I saw my opportunity. Actually, I began, drawing the black folder from my bag. I have some thoughts about the new direction for— Sarah, not now. My father cut in, voice firm but quiet. We're having a family dinner. No business talk. He turned to Mark with a smile. Mark, tell us more about that property deal you're closing this month. The dismissal was so automatic, so casually confident in its right to silence me, that something crystallized in that moment. It wasn't just that they didn't see me. It was that they actively chose not to see me, even as I held in my hands proof of my value that the entire industry had recognized. I looked at my father, really looked at him, seeing not the titan of industry I'd grown up admiring, but a man so comfortable in his assumptions that he couldn't imagine they might be wrong. I saw my brother, eager to continue his monologue, completely untroubled by the interruption of my voice. I saw my mother, eyes down on her plate, accepting this dynamic as she had accepted it for decades. And in that perfect, clarifying moment, I stopped accepting it too. I tucked the folder back into my bag, my decision made not in anger but in a quiet certainty that something fundamental had to change. I would no longer pour my talents into a company or a family that refused to acknowledge them. I was about to excuse myself from the table when my father's phone rang. Phones were supposedly banned from our family dinners, a rule he had instituted and only he regularly broke for emergency calls. He frowned at the screen, then answered. Pearson, he said briskly. What? Tonight? His expression shifted from annoyance to confusion. The Crawford and Myers Award? Sarah's name was announced? He looked up at me, genuine bewilderment in his eyes. There must be some mistake. But there was no mistake. And in the silence that followed, as 3 pairs of eyes turned to me in varying states of disbelief, I felt the weight of years of dismissals lifting. The truth was finally visible, not because I had found a better way to prove my worth, but because the world beyond our family table had recognized what they had chosen not to see. The silence at our family table lasted exactly 17 seconds. I counted each one as my father stared at me, phone still pressed to his ear. My mother's fork hovered midway to her mouth. Mark's expression cycled rapidly from confusion to disbelief to something that looked uncomfortably like fear. There's been a misunderstanding, my father finally said into the phone. We'll sort this out. Thank you for calling. He ended the call and placed his phone face down on the table with deliberate care, as if the device itself might explode if handled roughly. Sarah, he said, his voice carefully controlled. What is this about you winning the Crawford and Myers Award? I met his gaze steadily. I created Phoenix, the entire platform, from concept to implementation. That's not possible, Mark interjected. The development team had nothing to do with it, I finished for him. Neither did the consultants, or the strategic initiatives department, or any of the other people who've been taking credit for my work. My mother reached for her water glass. Sweetheart, why wouldn't you tell us something like this? The question was so genuinely bewildered, so completely lacking in self-awareness, that I almost laughed. Instead, I opened my bag and removed the black folder. I placed it in the center of the table, letting it rest between the bread basket and my father's half-empty wine glass. I tried to tell you, 3 times at least. You didn't want to hear it. My father's hand moved toward the folder but stopped, short of actually touching it. You're saying you developed the integration platform? Alone? Without authorization? Of all the possible responses, pride, apology, amazement, he had landed on the one that confirmed everything I'd finally come to understand. In his eyes, my achievement wasn't impressive, it was insubordinate. Yes, I replied simply. I saw a problem. I solved it. That's what I've always done, though nobody ever seemed to notice. But the ceremony, my mother said, glancing between my father and me. Shouldn't we go? If Sarah's won such a prestigious award— It's too late, I said, rising from my table. They've already announced the winners. I wasn't there to accept it because nobody bothered to tell me about the nomination. I gathered my coat and bag. Excuse me, I need some air. As I walked out of Castellino's, I felt strangely weightless. For years, I'd carried the burden of seeking validation from people determined not to give it. Now I was simply putting it down. I spent that night driving aimlessly along the coastline, windows down despite the January chill, letting the salt air clear my thoughts. By the time I pulled into my apartment complex at 2 a.m., I had made a decision. Not a dramatic one born of hurt or anger, but a quiet, steady choice to reclaim my own worth. The next morning, I opened my laptop and began methodically disentangling myself from the invisible support structures I'd built within my family and Pearson Technologies. First, I canceled the automatic payment for Mark's car lease, something he didn't even know I had been covering for the past year, after he complained about cash flow issues during an expensive divorce. My father had quietly asked me to help your brother through this rough patch, and I had agreed without hesitation. Next, I logged into the family's shared vacation planning portal. We had a tradition of annual summer trips, supposedly divided, equally among the four of us, but primarily financed by me for the past 3 years. I removed my credit card information and withdrew from the upcoming Napa Valley Wine Tour Planning Committee. I moved through each digital connection systematically, cutting ties not with dramatic declarations but with precise clicks. The family Netflix and Spotify accounts I maintained, canceled. The website I designed and hosted for my mother's charity work, transferred to a paid service provider. The cloud storage account where my father kept backup copies of his important documents, migrated to a professional solution with its own subscription fee. None of these actions were meant to punish. They were simply the necessary untangling of a woman who had been subsidizing her own erasure. For years, I had poured money, time, and expertise into maintaining my family's comfort while they overlooked my contributions. The pattern ended now, not with a bang but with the quiet click of cancel subscription. At work the next day, I arrived precisely on time, not my usual 30 minutes early. I wore a deep blue dress I had purchased months ago but considered too bold for the office. I responded to emails efficiently, but did not volunteer for additional projects. When a colleague from another department asked if I could just take a quick look at a system issue, I directed them to the appropriate support ticket channel rather than fixing it on the spot as I normally would. These small adjustments felt strange, almost uncomfortable. I had built my identity around being helpful, reliable, the one who solved problems without being asked. Reclaiming my time and energy required conscious effort, like exercising an atrophied muscle. By midweek, the digital consequences of my boundary setting began to ripple outward. My phone accumulated text notifications. From Mark. Hey, weird issue with the car payment. Did you change something with the account? From my mother. The Netflix isn't working, dear. Did we forget to pay it? From my father. Can't access the backup drive. Send new login when you have a moment. I read each message but didn't respond immediately as I would have in the past. That evening, I composed a single, carefully worded email. I've made some changes to my financial commitments and digital responsibilities. Moving forward, I'll no longer be managing shared subscriptions or making payments on behalf of others. I've transferred ownership of relevant accounts where possible or canceled services I was personally subsidizing. This isn't meant to cause inconvenience, just to clarify boundaries that should have been established long ago. Sarah. I sent it to all 3 family members and then silenced my phone. For the first time in years, I made dinner for myself without one eye on my email, spent the evening reading a novel I'd been meaning to start for months, and slept deeply without the usual undercurrent of anxiety about what problems might need solving tomorrow. The responses came exactly as I expected. My mother called 4 times the next morning, leaving increasingly concerned voicemails that never quite addressed the substance of my email. Mark sent a text that read only, "Seriously? Now?" My father's response was most telling. Complete silence, as if ignoring the situation would restore the previous order of things. At work, I continued my quiet revolution. I stopped attending meetings where my input was routinely ignored. I declined invitations to brainstorming sessions that inevitably resulted in me implementing someone else's poorly conceived ideas. I documented everything related to Phoenix in exhaustive detail and uploaded it to the company's shared drive, but did not offer to explain or elaborate when confused emails started arriving from the development team. A week after the dinner, at Castellino's, Jennifer, my father's assistant, appeared at my cubicle. "Your father would like to see you," she said, her expression carefully neutral. I nodded. "I'll be there in 15 minutes. Not dropping everything immediately was a small act of self-respect, but it felt significant. When I entered my father's corner office exactly 15 minutes later, I found him standing by the window, looking out at the city skyline. He turned as the door closed. "The board is asking questions about Phoenix," he said without preamble. About who developed it, who should be credited, about why the person responsible for saving the company isn't in a leadership position. I sat in one of the visitor chairs, crossing my legs comfortably. "What did you tell them?" He ran a hand through his silver hair, a gesture I'd seen thousands of times, usually when he was formulating a strategic response to a difficult situation. I told them I needed to sort out some internal confusion before making a formal statement. "There's no confusion, Dad. I built Phoenix, the entire platform. I tried to show it to you 3 times and you dismissed it as a pet project. I implemented it anyway because the company needed it, and I documented everything thoroughly. The evidence is all there in the development logs, the code commits, the system documentation." He sat heavily in his chair. "Why didn't you push harder? Make me understand what you were working on?" The question was so perfectly characteristic that I almost smiled. Even now, he was framing my achievement as a failure of communication on my part, a failure to make myself heard rather than his failure to listen. "That's not how professional respect works," I replied evenly. "I shouldn't have to force you to take me seriously. I shouldn't have to shout over everyone else at the table to be heard." "The board wants to promote you," he said after a long pause. "Chief Technology Officer, reporting directly to me." "No, thank you." His eyebrows shot up. "What do you mean, no? This is exactly the recognition you've been wanting." I wanted recognition for my work as it was happening, not after external validation forced your hand. I leaned forward slightly. "I don't want a promotion that comes from embarrassment rather than appreciation. Sarah, be reasonable. This is a tremendous opportunity. The compensation package alone? I'm not interested in the money. I'm interested in working somewhere my contributions are valued from the start, not just when failing to acknowledge them becomes politically untenable." I placed a USB drive on his desk. "This contains complete documentation for Phoenix, including planned updates and expansion modules. It also contains my resignation letter. My 2 weeks' notice starts today." My father stared at the small metal object as if it were a live grenade. "You're leaving? Over one misunderstanding?" This wasn't one misunderstanding. This was a pattern that's defined my entire tenure at Pearson Technologies. I stood up, smoothing my dress. I built something remarkable while being actively discouraged from doing so. Imagine what I might accomplish in an environment that actually supports me. "Where will you go?" he asked, something like genuine concern flickering across his face. "I have options," I said simply. "I've always had options. I stayed because this is family, and I thought that meant something. Now I'm choosing to find out what I can build when I'm actually seen from the beginning." I walked out of his office feeling lighter than I had in years. The decision wasn't impulsive or emotional. It was the natural conclusion to a story that had been writing itself for nearly a decade. I had given Pearson Technologies every opportunity to value me appropriately. Now I was giving myself permission to find my worth elsewhere. Word spread quickly. By lunchtime, my modest cubicle had become a strange pilgrimage site, with colleagues from every department finding reasons to pass by. Some offered awkward congratulations on the award. Others expressed shock about my resignation. The more perceptive ones simply nodded with knowing looks, as if my decision confirmed something they had long suspected. Mark appeared late in the afternoon, hovering at the entrance to my workspace with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Dad tells me you're leaving," he said without preamble. "That's right." "Because you're upset about the award thing? Because Dad didn't pat you on the head enough?" I looked up from my computer, studying my brother properly. Behind his practiced confidence and expensive suit, I saw something I recognized: fear. Mark's entire identity was built around being the heir apparent, the natural successor. My sudden visibility threatened not just his position, but his self-concept. "This isn't about hurt feelings," I said quietly. "This is about recognizing that I will never reach my potential in an environment where I'm fundamentally not respected or heard." "That's ridiculous. You just never learned how to communicate effectively. In business, you have to." "I built an award-winning platform that saved the company while being actively dismissed. I communicate just fine. The problem is that certain people choose not to listen." I returned to organizing my files. "And let's be honest, Mark. You're not worried about my career. You're worried about yours." He flinched. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means that if I created Phoenix without resources or support, people might start questioning what you've accomplished with every advantage. It means the narrative of you as the talented one and me as the reliable background player doesn't hold up anymore. It means you're afraid." The flush that spread across his face confirmed my assessment. "You have no idea what I do for this company." "You're right," I agreed. "I don't, because unlike you, I've never taken credit for other people's work." He left without another word, his footsteps quick and sharp against the tile floor. I felt no satisfaction in the confrontation, only a strange sense of clarity. Mark and I had always operated in different realities within the same company. The difference was that I could see both: his world of perception management and networking, and my world of concrete solutions and behind-the-scenes fixes. He had only ever seen his own. That evening, my mother called as I was preparing dinner. "Sarah, honey," she began, her voice tight with restraint. "I think you're overreacting. Your father feels terrible. He wants to make things right." "I'm sure he does," I replied, chopping vegetables with precise movements. "But this isn't something that can be fixed with a title or a raise." "Then what fixes it? Because walking away from your family's company seems extreme." "It's not walking away from family, Mom. It's walking away from a toxic work environment." I set down the knife. "There's a difference, though I'm not sure this family has ever recognized one." "But we are Pearson Technologies," she insisted, genuine confusion in her voice. "It's who we are." Her words crystallized something I'd felt for years but never articulated. That's the problem. Dad is Pearson Technologies. Mark is Pearson Technologies. You're Pearson Technologies by extension. I'm just Sarah, who happens to work at Pearson Technologies. Or did. "That's not true," she protested, but weakly. "When was the last time we had a family dinner where Dad didn't talk about the company? When was the last holiday that wasn't interrupted by work calls? When was the last conversation where my value wasn't somehow tied to my contribution to Pearson Technologies?" The silence on the line told me she couldn't remember either. "I love you, Mom. I'm not disappearing from your lives. I'm just choosing not to work somewhere I'm fundamentally invisible." I resumed chopping. That seems reasonable, doesn't it? I heard her sigh. When did you get so strong, Sarah? I've always been strong, I replied. You just never had to notice before. The 2 weeks of my notice period unfolded in ways I never could have predicted. Suddenly, everyone wanted my input on everything. Meetings were rescheduled to accommodate my availability. Executives who had barely acknowledged my existence now stopped to chat in hallways. My father sent daily emails with increasingly generous counteroffers, each framed as a recognition of my previously overlooked contributions. I maintained the same polite, professional demeanor that had always characterized my work. I documented Phoenix thoroughly, trained the team that would maintain it, and prepared comprehensive transition materials for my customer success responsibilities. The difference was that I now left precisely at 5 p.m. each day. I took proper lunch breaks, sometimes walking to the small park near the office to sit in the sunshine. I declined weekend work requests with simple, "I'm not available" responses, rather than apologetic explanations. These small acts of self-respect felt foreign at first, then increasingly natural. I wasn't being difficult or demanding. I was simply treating my time and expertise with the same value I wanted others to recognize. On my final Friday, I arrived to find a formal invitation on my desk for a special announcement in the main conference room at 2 p.m. I considered skipping it, suspecting some last-minute attempt to publicly persuade me to stay. But curiosity won out. Whatever performance they had planned, I could maintain my boundaries through it. When I entered the conference room at exactly 2, I found the entire executive team, my father, and even my brother waiting. On the polished table sat a familiar black folder, and beside it, something new, a gleaming crystal trophy. The Crawford and Myers Innovation Award. "Before you go," my father said, uncharacteristically hesitant, "we wanted to acknowledge your contribution properly." He opened the folder and removed the official certificate. "The awards committee sent this to the company address, and this," he gestured to the trophy, "was presented in absentia at the ceremony." Next to these, he placed a bound document. "This is the patent application for Phoenix, filed with you as the sole inventor. The legal team expedited it." I looked at the certificate, the trophy, the patent paperwork, then at the faces around the table. Some seemed genuinely regretful. Others clearly just wanted to be on the right side of the narrative now that my achievement was public knowledge. My father's expression was harder to read, a complex mixture of pride, regret, and something that might have been fear. "Thank you," I said simply, accepting the items. "Sarah," my father said, his voice uncharacteristically uncertain, "I know we can't undo the past, but the offer stands. Any title you want, whatever team you want to build, complete creative control." I carefully placed the award and documents in my bag. "My decision stands too." As I turned to leave, Mark stepped forward. "I sent your LinkedIn profile to some people at Westbrook Systems," he said abruptly. "They're looking for a chief technology officer, someone who can build something like Phoenix for them." I stared at him, genuinely surprised. "Why would you do that?" He shrugged, not quite meeting my eyes. "Just because we can't work together doesn't mean you shouldn't get what you deserve somewhere else." It was perhaps the most honest thing he'd ever said to me. I nodded. "Thank you, Mark." I walked out of the conference room with my head high, not in triumph, but in certainty. This wasn't about winning or punishing. It was about finally valuing myself enough to seek environments where I could thrive openly rather than succeed despite active constraints. The company hosted a small goodbye gathering in the break room. I accepted the cake, the card, the awkward well wishes with grace. When it was over, I walked out of Pearson Technologies for the last time, not looking back at the building that had been the center of my family's universe for as long as I could remember. The sun was shining, a gentle breeze carrying the promise of spring, and my future lay wide open before me, unscripted, uncertain, and entirely my own. The first weekend of true freedom felt surreal. I woke on Saturday with no emails to check, no family crises to manage, no looming sense of professional obligation. My apartment was quiet, sunlight streaming through blinds I hadn't bothered to close the night before. For several minutes, I simply lay there, feeling the unusual lightness in my chest, the absence of the tight knot that had become so familiar I'd stopped noticing it. I made coffee, actual French press coffee that I drank sitting on my balcony, instead of gulping from a travel mug while answering urgent messages. I read a novel. I went for a run along the harbor. Simple things that had somehow become luxuries in a life structured around others' needs and emergencies. By Sunday evening, the novelty had worn off enough for reality to settle in. I had walked away from the only professional identity I'd known as an adult. I had fundamentally altered my relationship with my family. The path ahead was uncharted, exciting, but also daunting in its openness. Monday morning brought the first wave of what would become a pattern. My father called at 7:15 a.m., his voice carefully casual. "Sarah, good morning. Just checking in. How are you doing?" "I'm fine, Dad. Enjoying some time off." "Good, good." A pause. "Listen, there's a situation with Phoenix. The development team is having trouble with one of the module integrations. I know you're not officially with the company anymore, but if you could just take a quick look." "I'm not available for consulting," I said, gentle but firm. "The documentation I left is comprehensive. They'll figure it out." A longer pause. "This is business, Sarah, not personal. The company needs—" "I understand. And I'm sure the well-paid development team will resolve it. Have a good day, Dad." I ended the call before he could respond, my hand only slightly shaking. Setting boundaries with family was new territory, especially with a father who had never encountered a boundary he couldn't charm or bulldoze his way through. Similar calls came throughout the week. My mother wondered if I might just help with the charity website I'd built for her, since no one else understands how it works. Mark texted about quick questions regarding projects I'd previously supported. Each time I responded with the same gentle but clear deflection. "I'm not available for that." By Friday, the tone had shifted from casual requests to increasingly desperate appeals. Jennifer, my father's assistant, called with an unusually direct approach. "Sarah, I'm not supposed to tell you this, but they're completely lost without you. The Phoenix updates scheduled for next week? No one understands the architecture well enough to implement them. Your father is in meetings with the board trying to explain the delays." "I'm sorry to hear that, Jennifer. I really am. But that's a staffing and knowledge management issue for Pearson Technologies to solve. He's offering triple your previous salary as a consultant, 10 hours a week, maximum." I sighed. "It's not about the money, Jennifer. It never was." "Then what is it about? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're punishing them." The question gave me pause. Was I punishing them? Was this quiet revolution actually a sophisticated form of revenge? "I'm not punishing anyone," I said finally. "I'm just no longer available to be undervalued." There's a difference. The weekend brought a new tactic: flying monkeys. Linda, my mother's closest friend, called Saturday morning. "Sarah, honey, your mother is beside herself. She says you won't even help with her charity website. That doesn't sound like you." "I built that website as a gift. I maintained it for 3 years without compensation. I transferred it to a professional service provider and paid the first year's fees. That seems more than generous." "But family helps family," Linda insisted. "Your mother has always supported you." "Has she? When I was being consistently undermined at work, when my contributions were dismissed or attributed to others, did she ever once speak up?" The silence on the other end of the line told me everything. "I love my mother, Linda. but I'm no longer available for one-way support systems that drain me while giving nothing back. My cousin Thomas was next, calling Sunday afternoon with casual questions about my plans that gradually shifted to concerns about family dynamics. "Your dad's pretty torn up about this whole thing," he said, trying to sound offhand. "He told my dad he feels like he's lost his daughter. He hasn't lost me. He's lost access to my professional expertise without acknowledgement or compensation. There's a difference. Come on, Sarah. This is family. It's messy sometimes, but you can't just walk away." I haven't walked away from family. I've walked away from an exploitative professional relationship. I'll still be at Thanksgiving. "Dinner." Thomas paused. "Will you, though? Because Uncle Robert seems to think you've gone full no contact." This was news to me, and illuminating. My father was spinning a narrative where I had abandoned the family entirely, not just resigned from the company. It was a subtle but powerful reframing that cast me as the unreasonable one, the emotional one, the one overreacting to a simple misunderstanding. "That's not accurate," I said carefully. "I've been responding to personal calls and messages. I'm just no longer available for unpaid professional consulting. If Dad is telling people I've gone no contact, that says more about his understanding of our relationship than it does about my actions." After Thomas, there were others, family friends, distant relatives, even my mother's sister calling from Florida with concerns about my extreme reaction to a simple misunderstanding. The pattern was consistent. I was being unreasonable. Family should come first. Wasn't I being a bit dramatic? With each call, I grew more certain of my position, more practiced in articulating boundaries that had previously existed only as vague discomfort. I wasn't angry. I wasn't bitter. I was simply clear about what I would and wouldn't accept moving forward. 2 weeks after my departure from Pearson Technologies, I received an unexpected message on LinkedIn from Caroline Wright, the CEO of Westbrook Systems, a mid-sized tech company known for innovative integration solutions. She wanted to meet for coffee to discuss opportunities. I accepted, curious whether this was the result of Mark's supposed recommendation or something else entirely. We met at an upscale cafe near the waterfront, Caroline immediately impressive with her direct manner and thoughtful questions. "I'll be honest," she said after preliminary pleasantries, "I've been tracking your work for over a year. The Crawford and Myers Award just confirmed what I already suspected. You're the actual technical genius behind Pearson Technologies' recent innovations." I blinked, surprised. "How did you know that before the award?" She smiled. "I pay attention to patterns. When a company suddenly develops capabilities that don't align with their established technical team's known expertise, I get curious. Plus, I've poached enough Pearson employees over the years to hear the whispers. Sarah fixes everything was a common refrain. We talked for nearly 2 hours, not just about technical capabilities, but about company culture, credit attribution, and collaborative frameworks. By the time we finished our second round of coffee, Caroline had offered me a position as Chief Technology Officer with creative control, substantial equity, and a clear mandate to build something new. "Take some time to think about it," she said as we parted. "This isn't a rescue mission. It's a recognition of talent. The offer stands regardless of your relationship with Pearson Technologies." I took her advice, giving myself space to consider the opportunity on its merits rather than as an escape route. A week later, after 3 more interviews with Westbrook's leadership team, I accepted the position. That evening, I called my father, not to ask permission or seek approval, but as a professional courtesy from one technology executive to another. "I've accepted a CTO position at Westbrook Systems," I said when he answered. "I wanted you to hear it from me rather than through industry channels." Silence stretched across the line, then, "Westbrook is a competitor." "In some market segments, yes, but their focus is different enough that direct competition is minimal. This feels personal, Sarah." "It's not. It's professional. I'm following the opportunity that best aligns with my capabilities and values. Another long pause. Is there anything I can say that would change your mind? Anything Pearson Technologies can offer? No, this isn't about compensation or title. It's about finding an environment where I'm valued from the start, not just after proving myself repeatedly without recognition. I see. His voice had gone flat, emotionless. When do you start? 2 weeks. I'll be leading their Integration Solutions division with full creative control. Well, congratulations. The words seemed to cost him something. I hope it's everything you're looking for. After we hung up, I sat in my quiet apartment, waiting for the guilt or doubt to emerge. It didn't come. Instead, I felt a growing certainty that I was finally moving in a direction aligned with my worth, not just my willingness to support others. The news of my new position spread quickly through family channels. My mother called the next morning, her voice tight with concern. Your father is taking this very hard, Sarah. He sees it as a betrayal. I understand that's how he feels, but it's a professional decision, not a personal attack. But why Westbrook? There are dozens of companies that would snap you up. Why choose one of your father's competitors? Because they made the best offer, recognized my value immediately, and have a culture that aligns with my working style. The fact that they compete with Pearson in some areas is incidental, not intentional. She sighed heavily. Will you still come to Sunday dinner this week? Your father would never ask, but I think it would help if you made an appearance. I considered the request carefully. Part of me wanted to maintain distance until the professional transition was complete. Another part recognized that family relationships existed beyond corporate boundaries. I'll be there, I said finally. But if it turns into a referendum on my career choices, I'll leave. Sunday dinner was a masterclass in strained politeness. My father maintained formal courtesy while avoiding any substantive conversation. Mark oscillated between awkward attempts at normal brotherly banter and loaded questions about Westbrook's market strategy. My mother fluttered between them, refilling wine glasses and steering conversation toward safe topics like the weather and her book club selections. I stayed for exactly 90 minutes, making calm small talk while deflecting every attempt to draw me into discussing my new position or Pearson Technologies' ongoing challenges. When I rose to leave, citing an early meeting the next day, my father finally broke character. I hope you know what you're doing, Sarah, he said, his voice low. Loyalty matters in this industry. I met his gaze steadily. Yes, it does. Loyalty should be reciprocal, though. Something to remember with your remaining employees. The week before I started at Westbrook, an article appeared in the local business journal. Pearson Technologies announces restructuring following key executive departure. The piece detailed how the company was evolving its leadership structure to better recognize technical innovation, with several promotions and a new emphasis on collaborative credit for technical achievements. Reading between the lines, it was clear my departure had triggered more than just personal discomfort. It had exposed structural issues in how the company identified and rewarded talent. The article mentioned that Mark had been reassigned from special projects to strategic partnerships, a lateral move that nonetheless suggested a reassessment of his actual contributions. My mother forwarded the article with a single line. Your leaving is changing things here. No judgment, no pressure to return, just an observation that carried more acknowledgement than years of conversation had achieved. My first day at Westbrook, systems felt like stepping into an alternate reality. My office, an actual office with a door, not a cubicle, had a welcome basket and a handwritten note from Caroline. The morning began with a leadership team meeting where I was introduced, not as Robert Pearson's daughter, but as the visionary behind the award-winning Phoenix platform. When I spoke during that first meeting, offering observations about integration challenges based on my experience, people took notes. They asked questions. They built on my ideas rather than talking over them. It was so startling that I found myself momentarily speechless when Caroline directly asked, "What approach would you recommend, Sarah?" "I'm sorry. Could you repeat the question?" I asked, buying time while adjusting to being actually heard. Caroline smiled slightly, as if she understood exactly what was happening. "Take your time. We value thoughtful responses over quick ones here." By the end of my first week, I had experienced more professional respect than in 8 years at Pearson Technologies. My team, hand-picked specialists with complementary skills, responded to my direction with enthusiasm tempered by appropriate questions and suggestions. Projects moved forward without constant roadblocks or credit stealing. When I stayed late, one evening to finish reviewing specifications, Caroline stopped by my office. "We don't measure dedication by hours worked here," she said, leaning against the door frame. "Results matter. Burnout doesn't help anyone." I looked up, surprised. "I'm just finishing this review. Old habits." "Those habits were formed in a different environment. Give yourself permission to develop new ones." She straightened. "The documents will still be there tomorrow. Go home, Sarah. The company will survive without you until morning." It was such a contrast to the implied expectations at Pearson, where leaving before the executive team was seen as lack of commitment, where weekend work was praised as dedication to excellence, that I found myself blinking back unexpected tears. "Thank you," I said simply, gathering my things. As I drove home that evening, I realized I was experiencing something new. A workplace where boundaries weren't just permitted but encouraged, where my value wasn't measured by how much I sacrificed, but by what I contributed during reasonable hours, where my voice was heard not because I had to fight to make it heard, but because listening was the default. The contrast illuminated just how dysfunctional my professional existence had been, how I had normalized being undervalued, overlooked, and overworked because it was familiar, because it mirrored family dynamics I'd grown up with. The realization wasn't bitter, but clarifying, like finally putting on glasses after years of squinting at a blurry world. That weekend, I received a text from Mark that seemed to come from nowhere. "Dad's considering selling the company." No context, no follow-up. Just a statement that hung in digital space, weighted with implications. I didn't respond immediately, unsure if this was manipulation, information sharing, or something in between. An hour later, he texted again. "Not asking you to come back, just thought you should know." I finally replied, "Thank you for telling me. Is this public knowledge?" "No. Early discussions only. Phoenix created significant value, but without ongoing development, the board is concerned about future innovation." The subtext was clear. Without me, they were struggling to maintain the momentum Phoenix had created. Part of me felt vindicated. Another part felt genuinely sad for the employees who might face uncertainty if the company changed hands. "What are your thoughts about it?" I asked, curious about my brother's perspective. The typing dots appeared and disappeared several times before his response arrived. "It's the right business decision, probably. Doesn't make it easier to accept." It was perhaps the most honest thing Mark had ever said to me. An acknowledgement, not just of business reality but of emotional complexity. For the first time, I glimpsed the pressure he must have felt as the designated heir to our father's legacy. The impossible standards he'd tried to meet through shortcuts and self-promotion because the alternative was admitting he couldn't fill those shoes. "Change creates opportunity," I replied, offering neither false comfort nor petty satisfaction. "Whatever happens, you have skills that translate beyond Pearson Technologies." "Do I?" The question seemed to contain genuine self-doubt, another first. "Yes, you're good with people. You build networks. You understand market positioning. Those are real abilities, Mark." The conversation shifted something in our relationship. Not dramatic reconciliation, but a small step toward seeing each other more clearly, beyond the roles we'd been assigned in the family narrative. As my first month at Westbrook unfolded, I found myself growing in unexpected ways. Without the constant drain of managing family dynamics and covering for others' mistakes, my creative energy flourished. Ideas that had been background thoughts while handling crises now moved to the foreground. I started development on a new integration framework that built on Phoenix's foundation, but incorporated everything I'd learned from its limitations. My team responded with enthusiasm, building on my initial concepts with innovations of their own. The collaborative energy was infectious, each person's contribution acknowledged and incorporated, creating something better than any of us could have. Developed alone? Caroline checked in regularly, not to micromanage, but to ensure I had the resources I needed. During one of our weekly meetings, she made an observation that stayed with me. "You know, Sarah, I've noticed something interesting. When you first arrived, you seemed almost surprised when people listened to you. Now you speak with the natural authority of someone who expects to be heard. I considered this. I guess I'm adjusting to a different normal." "It's not different. It's just actual normal," she smiled. "What you experienced before was the abnormal situation. This is how professional environments are supposed to function." The insight was profound in its simplicity. The dysfunction I'd navigated wasn't universal. It was specific to the system I'd been embedded in. Understanding this made me realize how much of my energy had been spent adapting to unnecessary constraints rather than expanding into my capabilities. This recognition fueled both professional growth and personal healing. I began setting clearer boundaries in all relationships, not just professional ones. I started a twice-monthly dinner with a small group of friends who celebrated my successes without competition or minimization. I took a weekend watercolor class simply because the colors called to me, not because it served any practical purpose. Gradually, I was building a life measured not by what I gave to others, but by what made me feel whole, engaged, and valued. The quiet revolution that had begun with a black folder on a restaurant table was expanding into a complete reimagining of what my life could be. 6 months into my role at Westbrook Systems, we launched Meridian, the integration platform I developed with my team. The industry response was immediate and enthusiastic. Within weeks, we had signed partnerships with 3 major technology providers and were fielding inquiries from dozens more. The trade press ran features on Westbrook's innovation renaissance under new technical leadership. The Crawford and Myers Committee reached out about considering Meridian for next year's awards. Through it all, I maintained a quiet centeredness that surprised even me. Success felt different when it arrived on my own terms, satisfying but not defining. I celebrated with my team, acknowledged their contributions publicly, and made sure credit flowed to those who earned it. The culture we built around Meridian became as important to me as the technology itself. Caroline noticed the difference. "You know what makes you exceptional, Sarah?" she asked during our quarterly review. "It's not just your technical brilliance. It's how you've broken the cycle. People who've been undervalued often repeat the pattern when they gain power. You've done the opposite." Her observation resonated deeply. I had consciously structured my leadership approach as the inverse of what I'd experienced: transparent, collaborative, generous with recognition. Not from a place of reaction, but from understanding what truly enabled people to do their best: work. As professional success settled into a sustainable rhythm, my personal life began to find its balance too. I established Sunday afternoons as sacred time for myself, reading, painting, walking along the harbor front where sailboats drifted like thoughts across the water. I joined a local tech mentorship program for young women, sharing what I'd learned about navigating industry challenges while staying true to yourself. My relationship with my family evolved more slowly, in fits and starts. My mother was the first to adapt, gradually shifting from attempts to pull me back into old patterns to genuine interest in my new life. Our weekly phone calls became less about family obligations and more about authentic connection. She even started speaking of developing interests beyond supporting my father, taking Italian lessons, joining a book club that had nothing to do with business or self-improvement. "I'm thinking of redecorating the living room," she told me during one call. "Your father says it's a waste of money since the current furniture is perfectly good, but I've been looking at the same sofa for 15 years. What style are you considering?" I asked, hearing something new in her voice. A tentative claiming of preference. Something completely different. Maybe mid-century modern with bold colors. Something that feels like me. The phrase hung between us, significant in its simplicity. Something that feels like me. After decades of arranging her life around my father's preferences and needs, my mother was beginning to ask what she actually wanted. "I think that sounds wonderful," I said, meaning it entirely. Mark's adjustment took a different path. When Pearson Technologies ultimately sold to a larger conglomerate 6 months after my departure, he found himself at a career crossroads. The acquiring company had their own leadership structure, leaving him with a generous severance package and an uncertain future. To my surprise, he called me for coffee. We met at a neutral location, an artisan cafe halfway between our apartments. He looked different, less polished, more human in casual clothes without the armor of expensive suits and practiced confidence. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said," he began, stirring his coffee absently. "About my actual skills versus what I've taken credit for." I waited, giving him space to continue. "The thing is, you were right. I've spent my whole career trying to be dad, trying to be technical enough, visionary enough, commanding enough. It never worked because it's not who I am." He looked up. "During the acquisition meetings, I realized I was more effective when I stopped pretending and just did what I'm actually good at, connecting people, translating between business and technical needs, finding strategic alignments. That's a valuable skill set," I said, meaning it. "It is, but it's not Dad's skill set. And for my whole life, that's been the measuring stick." He exhaled slowly. "Watching you walk away, build something successful on your own terms, it's been enlightening. Uncomfortable, but enlightening." "What will you do now?" I asked. "I've had some conversations with venture capital firms. They need people who can evaluate technical companies without being developers themselves. People who understand both sides of the equation." He smiled slightly. "Turns out all those hours of watching you fix my messes taught me something after all." Our relationship wasn't magically healed in that conversation, but something shifted. A mutual recognition that we had both been shaped by the same dysfunctional system, just in different ways. He had been elevated beyond his capabilities while I had been diminished below mine. Neither position had served us well. My father remained the most resistant to change. For 3 months after the company's sale, he didn't contact me directly. I heard updates through my mother. He was consulting for the acquiring company, considering writing a book about entrepreneurship, declining invitations to industry events. The silence between us wasn't hostile, just vacant, as if he didn't quite know how to relate to me outside the framework of company hierarchy. When he finally called, it was characteristically abrupt. "Sarah, I've been asked to speak at the Technology Leadership Summit next month. They've requested that I discuss innovation management, specifically how companies can better identify and nurture technical talent." A pause. "I find I don't have adequate perspective on this topic." It was as close to an admission of error as he had ever come. "Are you asking for my input?" I clarified. "Yes. I thought perhaps we could meet. Discuss your perspective on where Pearson Technologies, where I failed to recognize or support your contributions appropriately." The conversation wasn't easy. We met on neutral ground, a private room at the downtown library where we could speak freely. For the first hour, he listened more than he spoke, taking notes as I outlined the specific instances of dismissal, the systemic biases, the cumulative impact of being overlooked. He asked clarifying questions but didn't defend or justify, which was itself remarkable. Near the end of our discussion, he looked up from his notes with an expression I'd rarely seen: uncertainty. "I've been thinking about this for months," he said slowly, "trying to understand how I could have missed what was right in front of me, how I could have failed to see the value of my own daughter's work." He straightened his shoulders. "I've concluded that it wasn't a momentary oversight or a simple misunderstanding. It was a fundamental flaw in how I understood talent, value, and frankly gender in technology leadership." I sat very still, not interrupting what appeared to be a difficult but necessary acknowledgement. I missed the most innovative contribution in the company's history because it came from someone who didn't match my mental image of what innovation looks like. That's not just a personal failing. It's a business failure of significant proportion. He closed his notebook. "I owe you an apology, Sarah. A real one, not a strategic one." The words I had once hoped for now arrived when I no longer needed them to validate my worth. Still, they mattered. Not as redemption, but as evidence that growth was possible even in the most entrenched patterns. "Thank you," I said simply. "I appreciate that." "I don't expect this changes anything between us professionally," he added, "but I hope it might be a step towards something better personally." It was. Slowly, cautiously, we began rebuilding a relationship not defined by corporate hierarchy or family expectation, but by mutual respect between two adults with different perspectives and experiences. We would never be close in the effortless way some fathers and daughters are, but we found a new equilibrium, formal at times, but authentic in its boundaries and acknowledgments. A year after walking out of Castellino's restaurant with my award in a black folder, I stood at a different podium, accepting a Women in Technology Leadership Award. As I looked out at the audience, I saw my team from Westbrook, Caroline and the front row, and, somewhat surprisingly, my entire family seated at a reserved table. My acceptance speech was brief but heartfelt. I spoke about innovation requiring both technical excellence and environments where diverse voices can flourish. I thanked my team by name, acknowledging specific contributions each had made to our collective success. I expressed gratitude to Caroline for exemplifying what leadership could look like. Then I paused, meeting the eyes of my family members one by one. "I also want to acknowledge my journey here," I said carefully. "It hasn't been straightforward. There were times when my contributions weren't recognized, when my voice wasn't heard. Those experiences taught me valuable lessons about what I will and won't accept, about the environments where I choose to invest my talents." I saw my father nod slightly, accepting the gentle reference without defense. But those experiences also shaped my approach to leadership. They taught me to look for value in unexpected places, to amplify voices that might otherwise go unheard, and to build systems where credit flows freely to those who earn it. Sometimes our greatest growth comes from our most difficult challenges, not because the challenges themselves were necessary, but because overcoming them reveals our true capacity. Later, at the reception, we gathered for a family photo, not the stiff hierarchical arrangement of previous years, but something more balanced. My mother standing tall in a vibrant blue dress she had chosen for herself. Mark relaxed and genuine without the strain of pretense. My father still formal, but present in a way he hadn't been before. And me, centered not because I was pushing to be seen, but because I no longer needed to shrink myself to maintain peace. The photographer counted down, 3, 2, 1, and captured not a perfect family, but a family in progress. 4, distinct individuals learning to see each other clearly, to respect boundaries, to value authentic contribution over comfortable narratives. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. There would still be missteps, old patterns occasionally reasserting themselves, moments of frustration or misunderstanding. But we had broken the cycle of invisibility and inflation, that had defined us for so long. We were building something new, a family where value wasn't defined by title or conformity, but by genuine respect for each person's unique strengths and fundamental worth. As the camera flashed, I smiled, not the careful, measured smile of someone bracing for dismissal, but the open expression of a woman who knew her value, spoke with her full voice, and expected to be heard, not because others granted me that right, but because I had finally granted it to myself. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.